Thank you for joining us today for the virtual Sunday service with the Center for Creative Living. CCL, a charter of the Universal Church of the Master, has served and supported the spiritual needs of its community here in the Bay Area for over 20 years.
This is a Center for Creative Living board meeting. Yeah, we get together, we work on Sundays, and we're glad to have you here. Thank you so very much for joining us. Wasn't that exciting? You got to see the board. I don't know if you realized who was on the Center for Creative Living board, but it's the Reverend April Lucier, it's the Reverend Jim Gonzalez, the Reverend Donna Zahner, the Reverend Ann Corbin, and of course, the Reverend Corky Whitaker. And they constitute the board. And the board says what we're going to do, when we're going to do it, why, what. They're really nice people. We enjoy meeting and getting together and having bagels and coffee on a Sunday morning. Isn't that great? And now we have so many things coming up because next Sunday, it's going to be Gabrielle Antelovich, and she's going to be speaking here to kind of kick off Gay Pride. And for many of you, you know Gabrielle. She's the executive director of the Billy DeFrank Gay and Lesbian Community. And she is so great at the center of running things and getting speakers and all of that. And we always enjoy having Gabrielle here, okay? And so what's coming up then after that is our Joyce is going to be here. And this is, somebody that we haven't had before. It's Joyce Smith. We have Joyce Brown. Now we're going to have Joyce Smith. And Joyce Smith is in New York. And she's going to be talking to us about the history of spiritualism. And she's living in a town that was full of spiritualist people in the very, very beginning of the 1900s. And so we're going to hear a lot about how spiritualism came about. And that is bringing it all the way up to date. Is what she's talking about, because she's on the board of the Universal Church of the Master, our parent church. So we have a lot of things coming up, don't we? Yes. And now this is something that Joyce, I haven't heard what she's going to be saying. And so it's going to be new to me when I look at the video to find out what Joyce is going to have to share with us. So that's pretty exciting. And we are really looking forward to having her here later today, okay? And then, as I said, next week it's going to be Gabrielle. And then the week after that, it's going to be Joan Stutes. So all of these beautiful women are coming in to talk to you about various things that are coming up. Now, we had our first Thursday night Academy of Esoteric and Spiritualist Studies, where I talked about getting in touch with your spirit guide. We did it here in the center, and we also did it on Zoom. Now we're going to be doing, coming up, we're going to be doing one again, and that's not this coming Thursday, but the Thursday after. And we're going to be talking about getting in touch with past lives. Have you ever been somewhere and thought, I've been here before? Well, you probably have. And so we're going to help you get in touch with your past life. And that's going to be not this coming Thursday, but the next Thursday. And we're going to be here in-house, here at the center, surrounded by chairs. And we're going to be talking, and we're also going to be Zooming it. And this is something that we did just a few days ago. And it was so wonderful to see people's smiling faces from all around different places. So, why don't you join us? If you ever have any questions about what's coming up, what's happening at the Center for Creative Living, call me at 408-220-5780 and say, Dottie, could you tell me what's happening? Or call that number and give me your email address so I can put you on our mailing list. And we put it out every week, the CCL Insights. So you can find out what we're doing and what's happening. Now, We also have the videos of all of the sermons that we've been doing for all year. And go on YouTube at the Center for Creative Living, and you'll find lots of videos that you can watch of what we've been doing. Well, now, our wonderful Reverend Dr. Ayleen Augustine is going to be doing a prayer and a message. And then following that is Reverend Joyce Smith. And then our wonderful team here of Janet Childs, Reverend Janet Childs, and Reverend Corry Gott. They're going to be presenting meditation and videos. And it's always so beautiful because Janet with her guitar and her great voice, accompanied by these videos, a most magical thing. Welcome to the Center for Creative Living.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Reverend Dr. Ayleen Augustine and the Vice President of the Universal Church of the Master, and it is my honor to bring the prayer this morning. I hope everyone's doing well. I hope everyone is taking very, very, very good care of themselves. And keep in mind that while COVID and, all of the things that we need to do in order to take care of ourselves in that, we have to remember that there are other ways that we need to take care of ourselves. And it's easy to forget when you have one big thing that's happening, but there's a lot of little things. Making sure that we take care of, our spiritual self. Make sure we are taking care of our mental self. Make sure that we're taking care of our body in other ways, including eating as well as we can and getting enough rest. So it's important that we are able to look beyond what is the biggest thing we're dealing with and not forget that there's a lot of little things. Making sure that if you have a body ache or something like that, that you're taking care of it and you're resting. I mean, one of the biggest things we can do to take care of ourselves is take time to rest. And while we work through the big things that we need to take care of and all those things that we need to do still in order to keep safe, make sure that you're taking care of all the other stuff too. Are you hydrating enough? Are you getting enough nutrients? Are you getting enough sunlight? All of those things can add together to help our body be able to face whatever it is that is presenting itself. So make sure you're staying safe with COVID, and also make sure that you're eating well, and that you're drinking enough water, and that you're resting when you need to. And as we sort of come out of it, there is sort of that PTSD aspect of what has happened. And we need to make sure that we're gentle with ourselves and gentle with others. That when something doesn't feel right, we're letting somebody know. And if you have something that is weighing on you, that you talk about it. COVID isn't the only thing we have to talk about. There's a lot going on. And even if all those other things weren't a part of it, it's still important to take care of you. So you can look at the big picture and also look at the small one. And look at those little pieces that we can be able to take care of ourselves with. So please, take care of yourselves. Ask yourself at least one time every day, what do I need? Am I feeling okay? How am I doing? And if there's an area maybe that we're not feeling so well in, then we take a look at it, a serious look, and figure out what can I do to help this situation? Or who can I go to? And there's always a lot of people to talk to. So reach out if you need to. And take care of all of those other little pieces that need attending to. So, everyone take a nice deep breath in. And as we let it out, just letting anything that's weighing on your body, your mind, or your spirit fall aside into that little imaginary basket, because that's your care basket. Because in this space and at this time, you don't need to hold on to it. And frankly, it's healthier if you don't. Dear, blessed, and wonderful Creator, we thank you for this day, and we thank you for our lives. We thank you for every blessing that you give in each and every moment and with each and every breath. We thank you for the blessing of these amazing bodies. And we also thank you for our ability to take care of them. Creator, we thank you for all those who are working so hard to take care of so many people during this time. We thank you for the blessing of and ask that you bless and strengthen all those who are having a difficult time coming back into the world. Creator, let them know that they're safe. Let them know that they are loved. And as we move through this entire process, thank you for always being with us. Thank you for never leaving us alone through this. Thank you for allowing us to find gentleness towards each other by finding gentleness within ourselves. Creator, we thank you for accepting us just as we are, for both our light and our shadow, for our best decisions and those that didn't work out quite so well. Because you were standing next to us in both cases, either to celebrate or to put a reassuring arm around our shoulder and letting us know that you know we did our best. Creator, thank you for loving us and for teaching us to love one another, for protecting us and teaching us to protect one another, for accepting us and teaching us to accept one another. And Creator, whatever it means to you, we hope you have a wonderful day. For all your creation to the next 7 generations and beyond, Aho Matak Oyasin, Ago, 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 by earth, sea, and sky, Namaste, Shalom, Assalamu Alaikum, blessed be, and Amen.
My name is Dr. Joyce Smith, and I'm a UCM ordained minister and I'm here to talk about spiritualism. And I want to first reference my book. And although it does indicate on the flyer that told you that I would be speaking today, Amazon printed my book, and the $5.25 profit that I make is going to go to UCM. I'm here to introduce you to more information, perhaps, about spiritualism. Some of you may know that it did start in New York State, and some of you may know it was because of 2 young girls, the Fox sisters. And it was about an hour from here that they lived in a suburb of Rochester called Newark. And they were living in a rented small house that they began to hear mysterious noises in the house. And they themselves inquired whether it was a spirit, and there was a response with a knocking. And so they set up with the spirit that if it was a yes, the spirit would answer 1 time with a knock, and then if it wasn't, it was 2 times. So anyway, it was quite controversial at the time, and they did get quite a bit of publicity at the time. Neighbors heard the knocking, and what transpired was that the spirit indicated, as a result of their yes and no, that he had died in the house, but that he had been murdered. Several months later, after a lot of publicity about the Fox sisters, the cellar was dug up, but they didn't find any body. So it kind of came to an end that there may be nothing about it. However, it wasn't until many years later, quite a few years later, that in the Boston Journal appeared an article on November 23rd, 1904. Now we're going back when it began in the summer of 1848. Now we're 56 years later, and the discovery was made that proved that all doubt about what had transpired about the person being buried in the cellar. The skeleton of the man, this is what's reported in the November 22nd, 1904 issue of the Boston Journal. Quote, the skeleton of the man supposed to have caused the rappings, first heard by the Fox sisters in 1848, has been found in the walls of the house occupied by the sisters and clears them from the only shadow of doubt held concerning their sincerity in the discovery of spirit communication. And of course, this happened when William Hyde, a citizen of Clyde who owned the house, made an investigation as he was remodeling it and found almost the entire human skeleton between the earth and crumbling of the walls. So it corroborates the sworn statement made by Margaret Fox. So one has to wonder what the significance, differences might have been if they had discovered it back then. Anyway, it's what transpired in the years that followed shortly thereafter, that one of the Fox sisters came to Auburn with her brother, who lived nearby, and she met with some of the most prominent members of Auburn, the chief of police, the head of the hospital, in their homes meeting. And there were seances, only they call them circles then, in their homes. So, and there were several prominent people involved who attended the circles. And, but it was, of course, what transpired later when Mary Todd Lincoln, the widow, of course, Abraham Lincoln, came to Auburn. And of course, that got a great deal of publicity. And so a lot more began to occur with many, many mediums locating into the area, and Auburn became quite well known as the center of spiritualism. But I'm not here to waste your time. I'm here, of course, to give you what you might be seeking in the way of information that may be of help. I want to go back to my own childhood because that is when I did see spirits, and children often do. We have to keep, at the time, we had to keep that to ourselves. We're talking about early 1930s when I was born. It would have gotten me free room and board at the local asylum had I revealed that to my parents. But anyway, I know I saw them, and it was years later that in my own further investigation, I found out why I know they existed and what proves that they do exist. I want to refer to probably two of the most well-known people who really gave a great deal of credit to spirit world. And I want to mention first what Webster's dictionary says about the definition. It is the belief that the dead survive as spirits which can communicate with the living, especially with the help of a third party called a medium. Now, certainly in both the Old and New Testament, there is reference about spirit intervention and communication from approximately 1800 BC to 200 AD. So in the pages of the Bible, the reader is, quote, warned to discriminate carefully between true and false prophets. And many admonished to test the spirits. Even Jesus appeared to his disciples 11 times after his death upon the cross and told his disciples, there is no death, life is everlasting. So over the centuries, death has drawn great scrutiny and a distinct turning away, and most preferred to shut the darkness out by keeping the door slammed. But it wasn't until Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's books, the landmark book, of course, on death and dying, that began the denial about what happens to us as we die. And they're of the probably 2 million, at least, nurses that have graduated since 1980. That period of, well, her book was in 1969, but from about 1980 forward, nurses in their training have read all of the materials of Dr. Kubler-Ross. And of course, they know there exists spirit world and they're believers. The passage which follows is taken from her book. At the moment of transition, you're never, ever alone. You are not alone right now, but you don't know it. You are not alone even at the time of transition. Your spirit guides, your guardian angels, people whom you have loved and who have passed on before you, they will be there to help you in your transition. We have verified this beyond any shadow of a doubt, and I say this as a scientist. Most of the time, it can be a mother or a father or a grandparent or the child that you may have lost. It is sometimes people that you didn't even know were on the other side already. But later, not too much later, in 1971, the astronaut, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who founded the Institute of Noetic Sciences, that did in fact investigate mediumship, because one of the areas of focus of the paranormal matters that existed at the time was his goal. And a group of their scientists and research did publish a book on the subject, and a new name was given to it called Channeling, which is also the name of their book. So thus the stamp of approval was given to it, and communication with the other side is recognized as possible. So the legitimacy of spirit world, now thanks to Dr. Kubler-Ross and Dr. Edgar Mitchell, we now know there's legitimacy to it. After the occurrences in Hydesville, New York, outside of Rochester, and I want to go back to some of my notes, the movement began to grow slowly, and certainly the number of books and materials that are out throughout the years that have since, probably the most interesting, and it's been republished, is his Edgar Allan, excuse me. The book that was more recently done is The Man Who Wrote the Sherlock Holmes book, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And his books, and in his book, he admits that he too is a believer. Certainly one of the area's most prominent citizens, and for 40 years, he was an advocate of the phenomena of spiritualism, was William Smith. William Smith built the Smith Opera House in Geneva in 1894. He was the one who founded the first non-denominational college in the United States in 1908. And certainly it's of interest that I was involved in the beginning restoration of the Smith Opera House in 1979, not knowing at the time about William Smith. He happened to visit a very famous medium in Moravia at the time, and in my work in studying and proving the existence of spiritualism starting here in Auburn, I learned that Moravia, which is here in the same county, became the Mecca of spiritualism because of Mary Todd Lincoln's visit to the area. There was Mary Andrews was the medium that William Smith and a number of prominent people had come to see. And of course, it is believed that probably the people who were prominent at the time had spoken to President Fillmore, who was from the area, that there was a medium in his former town where he grew up. The house on Oak Hill Road outside of Moravia was where the seances were held. And Mary Andrews, of course, did have Mary Todd Lincoln stay overnight and in the residence. And she acknowledged that she got her best readings from Mary Andrews. It's interesting to note that there was a seance room in the White House. And of course, Mary Andrews was committed to an asylum by her son. But it was, of course, later that what I'm telling you about her coming to Moravia became heavily publicized. By the way, the house in Moravia where this all happened is now being restored by a couple who want to have it as a bed and breakfast. They bought it without knowing about the history of the house. And at the time that spiritualism was so popular, and we're talking about that particular time in the latter part of the 1800s, there were as many as 8 trains belonging to the Southern Central Railroad that came into Moravia daily. And most of them came because of the mediums that were in the area. Spiritualist churches and groups established campgrounds in some areas, and nearby there's one in Freeville and one in central New York at Lilydale, and I've spoken and done readings at both. Mary Todd Lincoln came to Moravia in February 22nd, 1872. And she, of course, stayed at a hotel in Auburn. It's interesting that some years before, I had done a drawing of the Old National Hotel for Richard Palmer, who has written a number of books. But back in the 70s, when I was doing drawings for his articles, that particular hotel was one of the stories that he did. Anyway, he called me that night that he was there doing his research, and he said, well, guess whose name is in the register? And it was Mary Todd Lincoln's name. So even though he used to make fun of me, and when he'd see me on the street, he'd go, woo, woo, woo. And so for years, I got ridiculed because of my belief in spiritualism. But anyway, there was proof that he found it accidentally in the register of the hotel. And then, of course, it was in the March 9th, 1975 article about what was discovered there that was published locally. So spiritualism's beginnings in Kewitt County I've been researched and was able to, over time, and we're talking a number of years, that I was able to have an exhibit, an extensive exhibit at the area's Museum of History. And it was an exhibit that went on for 6 months. Probably the first known written work by Henry Whitney's book, Life on the Circuit with Lincoln. He writes about the president's belief in spirit world. And at the time, most people only heard about Mary Todd Lincoln believing in spirit world. There was a seance room in the White House. And anyway, since Whitney wrote the book, the biography on Lincoln prior to his assassination, and because they were friends, personal friends, he was the first to write that biography, and in it he wrote that, quote, he often communicated with the spirit world. President Lincoln did not go to church and was often confronted by the media because of his lack of attendance. And one occasion when he was cornered by the press, he was asked, what is it? What is your belief, Mr. President, since you don't go to church? And this is what he replied: if I do good, then I feel good. And if I do bad, then I feel bad. And that, gentlemen, is my religion. And then he walked away. Certainly, he's remembered as well as President James Garfield. It's the only two that were ever presidents that were born in a log cabin. I'm going to move on in my notes because I want to talk about a book written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who, as I mentioned earlier, the author of the Sherlock Holmes series. And his book, The New Revelation, and also the book, The Vital Message, were very popular at the time. And of course, the one book, as I mentioned earlier, has been reprinted. There were a number of prominent people at the time who were believers of spiritualism. And so I want to talk about my early experience seeing spirit as a child. And I want to talk about something that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle said in his book that he wrote about the little people, because he believed in them. And he said you could only see the leprechauns and the little people on ley lines. So ley lines are very important. Some of you know about a very famous healing center in Sedona, Arizona. It has long been regarded as a place both sacred and powerful, and it's certainly known as the Cathedral Without Walls. And because of what occurs there with ley lines, these are energy lines that many of them that come together and cross through Sedona. Now, these ley lines, we've known about them for centuries, but it's only been in more recent years, in fact, only 2 years ago, the University of Massachusetts was able to measure a frequency that emanates from the ley line, thus proving that this is how birds migrate and all other animals and mammals and so on migrate. The energy lines that we know existed forever. We know that the pyramids were built on them. Stonehenge was built on it. All of these well-known, whether we're talking Aztec monuments and throughout history, are on ley lines. But again, not until 2 years ago when it was proven by the University of Massachusetts, there really can be proven about ley lines. It's interesting that we all know that rivers flow south. However, that's not true of the Nile. And there are some other instances where water flows north, and that's here in this area. The Finger Lakes, they flow north, as does the Nile. So again, they're on ley lines, and the importance of ley lines has been known for a long time. The Masons, and of course we know George Washington was a Mason, the Masons were the ones back during the Middle Ages who built all the great cathedrals. They were the stonecutters. And it's interesting that the cathedral, in a cathedral, in the area where the altar was in the cathedral, is where two lines of the ley lines are intersecting. And again, that mystery of ley lines has been known by the Masons for centuries. Of course, the Native Americans have known about them forever. We do know that there are many, many mounds where these ley lines intersect, and there's literally hundreds of them in Ohio. And of course, it's Sedona, Arizona, where several of these ley lines intersect and continue to go through, and they go around the world, or the earth, I should say. Ley lines are usually only seen, as far as the awareness of them, is where white birch grow. Otherwise, you don't know where they are unless you have the knowledge of where they are. Again, a dowsing helps to identify where they are. I am a dowser, was trained by a shaman. And but there's many things that they doused for besides water. The other interesting thing about this area is that in the middle of Auburn, on the highest elevation, is Fort Hill Cemetery here. But it was also a Native American mound, and it's quite a large elevated area. And of course, now in my research, discovered that the signing of the Iroquois Confederacy, when the Five Nations signed their paper, that they would no longer fight among themselves, and they did. It became, by the way, the model for the the writing of the Constitution. Thomas Jefferson quoted that. So the importance of these ley lines, that when there's that many that intersect in very few places, Sedona, Arizona, I've already mentioned, but here in Auburn, New York, we've only just recently realized that how important this mound is. So one of the ley lines that goes to the Hill Cumorah, where Joseph Smith found the tablets. And so those that believe in the Mormon religion know about the Hill Cumorah, but that's on a ley line, and that major ley line that goes through Auburn goes there, and it continues on. One of the major lines that goes through Auburn, Fort Hill Cemetery, continues to Washington, D.C. And as we may probably be aware, that the monument and the Congress building and the White House are on a line, and they are on a ley line. And this was requested by George Washington, with his knowledge of the ley line that they believed in. Anyway, the importance of also the ley lines is that you, as Sir Arthur Conan Doyle said, is only where you can see spirit. And as a child, only in recent years, realized that one of those ley lines goes through a street where I lived. And that's why probably I did see spirits in that house. So the importance then of ley lines that we now are discovering is going to have a lot more to do in the near future as they realize more and more about its importance. I know as a child, I knew to keep that to myself, that I saw spirit, and I want to now reference again that it was Mary Todd Lincoln coming here and her belief in spiritualism that got a lot of attention in the area. My having a rather large exhibit at the local museum certainly established Auburn as the Mecca of where spiritualism really started. In my book, I have many, many stories that are paranormal in nature. The fact that we had the largest opera house in the United States was here, between Chicago and New York City. And many, many people, George M. Cohen, Sarah Bernhardt, all of the great people of that time performed here in Auburn. It's interesting that many mentioned the Opera House as being one of their best places to perform. And it was more than 4,000 people could be seated in the Opera House. The other interesting thing about Auburn, New York, and some people already know, it's where the first electric chair was used. So right in the heart of downtown Auburn is Auburn Prison. And I spent a few years doing volunteer work there. But I did a major article that filled a full page on the ghosts of the White House and in the Big House. And that is online. If you go to auburnpub.com and you put in ghosts in the Big House, you'll see that article. Many of the inmates, after some time that interacted with me, told me of their own experiences of seeing spirit. So, of course, they were not believers of it until you have your experience. I want to talk briefly about the brain activity that can now be measured when a baby is born in what they call theta, and then it moves into alpha, and it remains there until about the age of 10 or 11 or 12, and then it goes into beta. You and I are operating on beta right now, but as we go to sleep, we drop down into alpha. And many times when we may be driving down the road and we suddenly realize we may have driven a couple of miles, but we don't remember. Well, that's because your brain slipped into alpha. Alpha is a state of hypnosis. And so it's only in the state of alpha that I myself am able to communicate with spirit, because as children, being in alpha until they're about 12, it's not unusual for them to see spirits. The number of professional people in my area in the 70s that came together and formed a parapsychology group did quite a bit of reading about parapsychology at the time. We had Dr. Edgar Mitchell here speak at the college. He then spoke with us as a group. And of course, it was Dr. Peter Guy Manners, who was a doctor not only in physics, but he became a medical doctor. And his research in cymatics, which is using sound for healing. And so having studied with him in England and then in Boston later, I'm one of 50 that were able to complete his course on healing by using sound. So the sound frequency that they measured, were able to measure from certain points that emanated from the body, really surprised them when they compared it to an acupuncture chart. So they were able to prove that there was a reason that the Chinese for thousands of years had these charts, but now we know from those points the frequency can emanate. And it's when a person has a health condition that can be measured at that point, that it is not registering the correct frequencies. So the frequencies that can be given back to the patient to help correct their condition and stabilize it. Sometimes it's progressed too far and it can't be totally regained, but at least it can be slowed down significantly. Many times if it's caught early on, you can get immediate healing. So in the near future, we're already seeing some things being done about healing and the benefits of sound, but it's cymatics, which I am going to be sharing more with, working with UCM, so that those frequencies and the sound that those frequencies make for certain conditions will be made available to people that want to perhaps take advantage of having the frequency to help their condition. I'm seeing that my time is close, and I want to end with saying thank you for giving me the opportunity to share this. There's so much more that you can learn by reading my book and about some of my very unusual experiences, and how over the years the coincidence of things happening helped me to put together kind of the puzzle that helped me to prove that there's more to spirit world, and that there is so much more in the field of parapsychology, thanks to Dr. Edgar Mitchell and his group that are studying all of the paranormal situations that exist to find out if there's any proof to them. And of course, one of the major proofs that was done was in healing, that there can be healing by people who are healers. So be aware that there is more that you can learn if you're exposing yourself to some credible people in the field of science and medicine, and that we're learning more about the benefits of herbs, and certainly they were there to be the medicine that God made possible for us. I believe I've covered everything I need to and want to, but there's always more to talk about. I'm going to end now and say again, thank you for your time. And I hope I've helped you in becoming more aware that there is more to explore and to believe in. Thank you.
Do 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 do. Spirit rises against the setting sun. Spirit sings to us, we have always been one. Spirit opens the ever-changing door. Spirit reaches into us to become more. Reach out and receive your spirit gifts. Reach into your sweetest heart's truth. Reach through the resistance and the pain. Reach for what is deepest in you. Reach for what is deepest in you. Spirit rises against the setting sun. Spirit sings to us, we have always been one. Spirit opens the ever-changing door. Spirit's reaching into us to become more. There is a legacy that spans across time. There is a promise we will all be guided to find. There is a whisper that our soul reminds. There is the light that ever shines, ever shines, ever shines. Spirit rises against the setting sun. Spirit sings to us as we always have been one. Spirit opens the ever-changing door. Spirit reaches in us to become more in us to be more.
Thank you for joining us for this celebration of faith and fellowship. We'll be back next Sunday, and for those of you, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can leave them in the comments section. If you appreciate this video and the work that the Center for Creative Living is doing, please press like on the video. You can share the video, and also please subscribe, because that will help this community and the church grow. Remember, in these difficult and challenging times, the opportunity to give and support an organization that has done so much for the community is tremendously important. Please help the Center for Creative Living continue in the wonderful work that it does. We will make it through this. We will be stronger for it. Our faith will carry us. Be blessed, be safe, and have a wonderful week.